Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video and another episode of Best of Builds. This week we're talking about tanks, and no, I don't mean the heavy artillery with caterpillar tracks, I mean playing the tank. This is another one you guys have been asking me to do for quite some time. I did a tank video back before the game launched, but at the time of course it was more of a theory crafting build, and now that I've actually had a chance to play as the tank, I wanted to revisit this and give you a more up-to-date build. So if you guys do enjoy this video, and you do find it helpful, then a like would be super appreciated, and comment down below and let me know what you think. So before we get started, if you cast your mind back to the original tank build video I did, it had a heavy focus on the ballistic shield, because as well as having a number of useful mods, it also helps generate aggro or threat. However, threat in the Division is a little unpredictable. If you've ever played an MMO before, then you'll likely be familiar with the fact that if you assume the role of the tank, you typically use moves that generate a lot of aggro, and provided you can maintain that aggro, the enemies won't attack anyone but you. However, in the Division, even with weapon mods that increase threat, a shield which generates threat, and teammates that sit much further back, it is still remarkably difficult to maintain aggro 100% of the time, especially when you have someone in your team capable of dealing anywhere from 500k damage and up with a single sniper shot. A higher damage shot like that is a surefire way to make an enemy refocus their attention. So, while the ballistic shield definitely has its uses, from experience I can say that tanking in the Division is a completely different beast. It's the role that I've played pretty much exclusively since launch, and it's what I'm also going to be using going into the incursion next week, so I'm pretty confident in my ability to stay alive at the front lines, and as such, I'm going to share that with you. So, let's start with attributes. It's safe to say that your most important attribute as a tank is stamina. More stamina means more health, and more health means it'll take more shots to kill you, effectively. But, as with any good build, speccing into one attribute alone is not enough, and in order to choose the second attribute, you need to decide what kind of tank you want to be. My build is much more combat focused, so my secondary attribute is firearms, partly because it unlocks my weapon talents, and partly because it allows me to be hyper aggressive, get up in people's faces, and burn down their health at close range. That being said, were you to say spec the other way and go stamina skill power, you could instead be more of a support tank. You would be much less focused on damage altogether, but you would instead be focused on using skills to keep you alive and also control your enemies. Both are viable, both start from the same point, i.e. high stamina, but the choice is ultimately down to your personal playstyle. That being said, for this particular build, stamina in the region of say 90 to 100k should be enough for what you need. However, on top of that, it's also important to try and get your armor stat as high as possible. Armor helps with damage mitigation, so the higher your armor, the more mitigation you have, and that is again going to be super important when you're at the front lines. For example, 80k health with maximum armor mitigation is far better than 100k health with low armor. Stamina is of course useful to a point, but even a big health bar will get ripped through if you don't have armor to match. The armor mitigation stat caps out at 65%, so try and get as close to that as possible. I'm actually still swapping pieces out right now because I'm a little bit too low for my liking, but the aim is to get as close to 65% as possible. In fact, that actually pretty much applies to any build. High armor is never a bad thing to have, but it's especially useful as a tank. Now let's talk skills. First up, you're going to use the first aid with the booster shot mod. This temporarily increases damage for the affected targets in addition to the normal healing effect. However, on top of that, it also increases damage resistance for a short period of time, and stacking damage resistance when in the enemy's face is super important. In fact, in my situation with my build, because my skill power isn't too high, I don't actually use first aid for its healing properties, I simply use it as a means to get some free damage resistance. Secondary to that, you're going to want to grab a crowd control skill. This is for two reasons. Firstly, it's because if things get hectic and you need to get out, then it will give you that opening, and alternatively, it's also so that you can control the enemies right in front of you, so that way you can focus fire them down without having to chase them around. For this, the choice is really up to you. You could take the turret with the Zapper mod, which makes the turret shoot electrical darts that damage and shock multiple targets, but do bear in mind that this is more effective with higher skill power, so if you're spec down the firearms route, then this might not be the most effective choice. So alternatively, you could either take Sticky Bomb with the Flashbang mod to blind and disrupt enemies, plus this recharges pretty quickly anyway, so even with a low skill power build, this definitely has its uses. Or you could have the Seeker Mine with the Gas Charge mod. With this one, the mine seeks out and moves between multiple targets, releasing a cloud of disorienting gas on impact. Both of those are great because, as mentioned, they don't really depend quite so heavily on high skill power, and a Disrupt, Disorient, or a Blind is a great way to stop a group of enemies for a short period of time. And as for your signature skill, well, it's safe to say that your only and your best choice is Survivor Link. This increases damage resistance and speed for the user and nearby allies. And for those of you guys after an actual value, the damage resistance is 80%, so it is pretty substantial. This should of course be saved mainly for emergencies, either if you and your team are getting overrun and you need to escape or reposition, or alternatively it can also be used to make a strong push forward and perhaps rush down a boss. Now, moving on from there, let's talk about talents. First and foremost, you have critical save. Use a medkit during low health to increase damage resistance by 40% for 10 seconds. I mentioned this in my solo build video, but this is probably your most important talent. Get into the habit of using a medkit as a last resort when you're on low health and not just if you've lost say 1 bar, because doing so will give you a nice 40% damage resistance, and if you need to, you can even pop first aid for some additional damage resistance on top. Following on from that, you then want to take Adrenaline, where you use a medkit when not at full health to receive an overheal. And after that, you want to grab On the Move. Kill a hostile while moving to reduce incoming damage by 30% for 10 seconds. And if you pair this with an SMG, then more often than not you'll be strafing while shooting, so killing a target whilst moving isn't actually as crazy as it sounds. As for the last one, well, you actually have 2 options. The obvious choice is Battle Buddy. Revive a downed agent to reduce incoming damage by 50% for 10 seconds for both players. Again, anything to reduce incoming damage simply allows you to stay out in the damage for longer. But given that this does hinge on reviving a downed teammate, you need to ask yourself just how much use it's actually going to get. So your second option, and again this might seem a little bit odd, is Triage. Heal an ally with a skill to reduce skill cooldowns by 15%. I discussed this talent in my Sticky Bomb build, but in short, if you use first aid, doesn't matter what mod, next to all of your teammates, the Triage talent will cause your skills, not including your signature, to recharge instantly. And for crowd control purposes, this would then allow you to spam something like the Flashbang. See, the important thing to understand is that as a tank in the Division, you're not really just going to be standing up at the front lines, having everyone shoot you, taking damage, while your teammates kill enemies from behind. There will always be a shotgun rusher that simply passes you by, a sniper that has eyes for your marksman, or a grenade that simply ignores you. So more often than not, you're better off tanking while in close proximity to your team. See if they go down, then you can use your health to get to them, and if you're all pinned behind cover, then you can be the one to poke out first. And with skills like First Aid and talents like Triage, you can then also keep your team and yourself topped up with more defenses, while also having easy access to your skills a lot of the time. So, while tanking may seem a little bit unconventional in this game, it's definitely possible with some strategic placement and good health management. You'll actually be able to remain outside of cover a lot of the time, and if you do apply this to the Dark Zone, then nothing throws people off more than running headlong into them without a care in the world. Normally, if you're crazy enough to run straight at them, they get scared and they run away, or you just burn them down when you get close. But it's safe to say that as the Dark Zone exists right now, stamina is king. While piling a lot of things into firearms might seem like a good idea, invariably tanks will win the battle. And finally, as for weapon choices, SMG is an obvious choice given your close proximity and the natural crit chance, and secondary to that, I usually take something like an assault rifle, something that is effective at long ranges in the event that you're forced back behind cover, but something that is still good up close should you need it. Currently, I'm running with the Navy MP5 and the Black Market AK-74. And that, my friends, is pretty much it. That is my most up-to-date tank build. That's what I use pretty much all of the time in both challenge mode and in the Dark Zone, and will also be using going into the incursion next week. If you have any questions, by all means let me know down below, but thanks for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.